Hello and welcome to another episode of Reviewing the Civilian Review Board. My name's Ben. I'll be your host for the evening. I'm wearing a wrinkly shirt and I don't know what this spot is from. Right there. I don't know where that came from. But regardless of the fact, today we're going to be reviewing the Civilian Review Board and one of the calls that they had to weigh in on at their most recent session. This session was recorded on February the 28th, 2023. This is Civilian Review Board meeting number 19 for those of you who are paying attention. I only have 2 minutes of this clip that I have for you guys to see, but I'm going to walk you through everything that happened prior to this, and then we're going to watch the moment in question, and I'll be back if that makes any sense. So this was complaint number 22 whatever the hell it was. And this was a man who complained, or was actually someone who complained on behalf of a man who was arrested. And the complainant said that officers pulled somebody out of a vehicle for literally no reason. He wasn't doing anything wrong. The officers just ripped him out of the car and then they beat the hell out of him to an extent that he required to be transported to a hospital. When they reviewed the body-worn camera footage, showed that the man was stopped for an equipment violation. The equipment violation was window tint. The officer went up and greeted the man, went back to his cruiser, and then when he got out of the cruiser again, the man in his vehicle took off. This led the officers on a short pursuit. The officers caught up to him. He got out of his vehicle, tried to run. Officers caught up to him, and they delivered multiple, I think, hand, elbow, and knee strikes to him while he was on the ground because he was actively resisting the officers. The complaint was that he was pulled out of his car for no reason, that he was beat up for no reason, that the officers drew their weapons on him for no reason. When the investigator for the Inspector General's office reviewed the body-worn camera footage, they said that, the guy ran. They said that the uses of force were all acceptable, and then they addressed the pointing of their gun at this guy, and that's where we're going to kind of get into the part of the meeting here where they talk about that particular part of the incident. So you saw everything leading up to that. Then they're confused as to why the officers pointed their weapons at this man and what kind of discussion made that happen. We're going to watch the members of the Civilian Review Board discuss this point, and then I will be back to give you my thoughts and my explanation on what just happened. So enjoy this 1 minute and 58 second clip. I'll be right back.
Was there any, the fact that they had prior history, the officer and the complainant, is there any suggestion that skewed the officer's perspective, or I wasn't sure of the relevance of that?
Yeah. So I don't know, right? So this is kind of, I think, a broader question in terms of how we do these types of cases, because I don't know if there's, if you guys have a policy or practice in place here where if there's this additional history that goes beyond the scope of this particular, well, it's not beyond the scope, but is connected to this particular complaint, whether that's something that is looked into further. I don't know how that impacts the actual investigation itself, but it seems that was not dispositive in this instance.
In the report, there is a footnote that talks about it. When the when the investigator was reviewing the body cam, the officer made mention that he had prior history with the person. So he had stopped the person before. So it's noted in the footnote of the report that this particular person is known to have carried a weapon. And that's why the officer was just making it known to his partner and anyone else that this person could possibly be armed.
And so, and I don't know if this is part of this situation or elsewhere, but a general kind of policy consideration around this case is that this also seems that this was a predictable potential situation that could occur, and so I was wondering necessarily why that particular officer decided to make that traffic stop knowing that there has been this issue previously. So I think that might go beyond the scope of this particular complaint, but that is something that we did make note of. Does that?
This is when I watched this the first time, this was a legitimate facepalm moment for me. So during the course of the investigation, they're asking, why did the officer pull his gun on the suspect who was fleeing from them? During the course of the investigation, it was found that one of the officers had multiple prior interactions with this guy. And during the prior interactions, this gentleman who ran was armed with a firearm. So when they were chasing after him, they said, hey, be careful. Last time I had him, he had a gun. So the officers drew their weapon for safety. They ended up approaching him. They didn't shoot him. They took him under, and they put him under arrest. They had to use they had some levels of force because he was a maximum resistor. And they went from there. The Civil and Review Board is saying, hey, listen, there was prior involvement between these two. How do we take that into account? Here's where I want to start with that. When you're a police officer and you work in a neighborhood for any period of time, you quickly become familiar with the criminal elements of that neighborhood. And it's your job to interact with the criminal element of that neighborhood as frequently as possible to, one, dissuade them from committing crimes, and two, when you can catch them committing a crime, place them under arrest. So you're going to have multiple interactions with criminals frequently. The area that I work, I can't say that I know all of the criminals, but there are a lot of people who I know by their first name. I know their first name. I know their baby mama's name. Some cases I know their children's name because I've arrested their children as well. I know their address. I know their baby mama's address. I know their mom and dad's address. I know what vehicle they drive. When I hear that vehicle go out, the baby mama's name go out, their parents' address go out, their address go out, I am immediately, my ears kind of turn up. My spidey sense begins to tingle. And I'm like, ooh, I know who this person is. I have a history with him. I know a little bit about them. Now, the other thing, this guy, I forget his name, but he's an attorney and he has an obvious anti-police bias that I'm going to make a whole video about that. Again, in the past, I'll just say that when Micaiah Bryant was killed by Officer Reardon, while Micaiah Bryant was actively trying to stab a teenage girl to death, and the heroic efforts of a Columbus police officer interrupted her murder rampage by firing shots into Micaiah Bryant and unfortunately killing her in that situation, this guy right here went on Facebook and he said, this is not a time to wait for the facts. This is not a time to wait for the information. We need to take action. We need to take action now, blah, 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 blah. That's who we're talking about right here. So that's his perspective. But he comes back and he says, you know, that was another question I have, is that if the officers knew this guy potentially had a weapon on him, why are they doing a traffic stop? Think about that for a minute. Think about what it is. What is the job of the police officer? They have a man who is a known criminal, who's known for criminal activity, who has been illegally in possession of a firearm multiple times in the past. The officers see this man who is a known criminal, who is known to carry firearms and commit criminal acts. They suspect that he might be committing a criminal act today. Do you think maybe that is why they chose to stop him? If I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the right way to discuss this. If we want our society to be more safe, the city of Columbus in 2021 had, I think, 204 homicides. In 2002, they had 176 homicides. Thousands of people per year are being shot that survive their gunshot wounds in the city of Columbus. Last year was probably around 2,000 people were gunshot victims. The job of the police is to find these people who are not supposed to have guns, to find these people who are out there perpetrating acts of violence upon potentially innocent victims, because stray bullets, how many times do you hear about a 11-year-old, 12-year-old, 13-year-old The other day, 2 days ago, there was an 11-year-old in the city of Columbus that was shot. A couple of days prior to that, there was a 16-year-old in the city of Columbus that were shot. How many of these people are shot by stray bullets fired by people just like this guy who was out driving his car, and the officers attempted to stop him? When he fled, one of the officers said, "Hey, be careful, he might have a firearm." You're really confused as to why the officers are going to pull this guy over? Or tell me, Mr. Member of the Columbus Police Civilian Review Board, is it your advice to police officers that if they see a known criminal driving a vehicle and you know that that known criminal has a history of carrying firearms, is it your advice that the police officers do not stop him because that is a dangerous stop? Is that your advice? Is that what you want the police officers to be doing? Or do you want police officers who are out on the street actively looking for people who are committing acts of violence and have a history of committing those acts of violence and different other criminal acts, so that more citizens of the city of Columbus do not become victims of those criminal acts? Let me know what you would prefer. Would you prefer that the officers actively pursue criminals and chase them even though they might be putting their own life at danger? Or would you prefer that the police officers let that person go so that an 11-year-old, 12-year-old, 15-year-old, 16-year-old girl might be the next victim of that criminal actor? If you don't understand the basics, the most basic function of a law enforcement officer, maybe you should recuse yourself from the board that is telling police officers how to do their job. Those are my thoughts for today. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you soon.